G'day legends, I hope that you're really well, and we're here for another update. And look, the situation around Bakhmut is getting worse and worse, really by the minute. And in the coming days, we will likely see major changes. Well, that's what all the pointers are doing and the predictors are saying. But today we're going to look at the maps first, as always, and we'll have a talk about corruption and some plans between Iran and Russia as well. This video first is allegedly from a Ukrainian soldier leaving Bakhmut.
Вышли мы с этого ада. Бахмут, горит весь. Мы еле вышли группами мелкими. Наше начальство на нас хуй забило. Говорю как есть. Пацанов потеряли сегодня. За полчаса 4 трехсотых, 2 двухсотых. Бахмут. Вот все, кто остался. Вот группка. Уходим отсюда. Пиздец, блядь. Ад, там просто ад. Ребята, там ад. Я вам говорю. Всем давайте, нам надо идти.
And what we're really starting to see is, because I follow a lot of pro-Russian stuff and a lot of pro-Ukrainian stuff and try and find a middle ground somewhere in that. And if you want to do your own research and not listen to me at all, that's the way I would say, as someone with, a lot of months of experience there doing this, that's the way I would say to find the sort of a middle ground of information, because there's a lot of people on both sides who are pushing agendas and you need to find a middle ground. But what we are starting to see is a lot of very pro-Ukrainian channels really starting to admit that things are going poorly in Bakhmut, and their narrative of how they're reporting to this is changing greatly. Although the idea still sort of sits that Bakhmut is a ground where Ukraine can deal such huge losses to Russian forces that it is worth staying there. Although I would say this is true in some sense, we do know that the losses on both sides in this area are so huge, and that I believe that the capture of Bakhmut is more something that Russia need before they can start their offensive. And the longer Ukraine can hold off, Russia's capture of Bakhmut, the more they can hold off that offensive, therefore the closer to these Western weapons arriving. Let's look at the map. I'm sorry that was a very long intro to look at this. Now, someone said to me, and I do read some of your comments, that hey, thanks for zooming out on the map a little bit. So yeah, that's something that a lot of the time I'm just zoomed in on the east. You might not actually know the lay of the land. It's me sort of assuming some stuff. So look, here we've got Ukraine, Kiev, this is Warsaw, Poland, Romania, Russia, and this border along here is really where Ukraine actually border Russia, and this is Crimea. Some of this, say Crimea, was annexed in 2014. So this is where we're going to be looking, mainly down at the Bakhmut area, well, the Soledar region as it's being said. And we're going to go through a couple of maps while we're here. So Bakhmut. Look, as always, let's go through the last couple of days and see what's happening. And there's not only stuff happening in Bakhmut, but Krasnohora as well. So as you can see, through the 5th, there was some shift. And although some people jump to, they're not major moves. I agree. You're not talking 10 kilometers, but in some areas, door-to-door fighting as close range as this, any move is major. And let's move up. Today's the 6th of February. And on the 6th, you can see that Russia had some more success on the eastern side of Bakhmut, but Ukraine did push slightly back, or Russia fell back slightly in the south here. But as you can see, this consolidation line further into Bakhmut. And you can also see on this map, that Krasnohora is being somewhat squeezed and in some level of encirclement. So as you can see, the 5th, the 6th, and this area here is getting some level of encirclement. And we have seen videos coming out from pro-Russian channels of Russian soldiers within this area. It hasn't been geolocated exactly where, but it is believed that they are in this region somewhere. So as you can see, the last couple of days. And to the north further, let's see if there's much movement. Nothing really dramatic. But look, where we were focusing was Bakhmut, and let's have a look at what the other maps are showing, as we know that these do show significantly different stuff. So the live UA map, and as well the reason I show this is it's the most commonly used map, is showing a lot less of the encirclement, I guess, of Krasnohora, although some maybe more controlled territory. But it is showing that Russia has crossed this river that runs through Bakhmut here and is on the side. Although, no, they're not within this region of the train line, but definitely within especially the south, putting fire control onto this road. If this road becomes sort of under Russian control, the threat is then this next road is going to be completely under fire control of the Russians, although there's this small sort of hill line. You know, a lot of people are saying these are mountains. These are not mountains. I've been on both of these hills many a times. They're not mountains. They're rolling grassy hills with some level of trees between farm blocks. But the cutoff of this road would mean that there's really no way in or out. And let's do a measurement of distance between the closest point. So 800 meters, say back here somewhere, so a couple of kilometers. That is very close. And on the ISW interactive map, this one's showing a lot of the Russian controlled territory in and around very close to this road. And it is showing very similar to what the live UA map is showing, that on the north of Bakhmut, it is showing that they have crossed this river and they've cut off this north-south road. Let's see what the ISW is saying, Krasnohora. So Krasnohora is basically showing, if the claimed Russian controls anything to go by, that Krasnohora is in, look, I would call this an absolute encirclement, on operational encirclement as well. If you've only got one road, maybe there's something through here cut off, that this area is encircled if that claimed Russian territory is to be believed. And at the end of the day, it's only claimed by Russians. So let's look at the Russian sources map of Bakhmut area. And let's zoom in on this one here. I might have moved on the screen to get this. So what it's showing as well is, further Russian claimed control of the north and south of the city, and even a southwestern gain in here. So this as well, of course, is going to be more, towards the pro-Russian side. This is the Russian sources map. But again, what you need to do is you need to take between this and the pro-Western, pro-Ukrainian maps and get some level of idea. And this and, say, the live UA maps are showing a very similar picture. They really are. That I think it's got to be somewhere within, the truth is somewhere in between the two. And this is just showing a really bad situation in that region. So let's move further north to the Lyman front line and really into Kremenar, where we know there has been so much fighting in the direction of Lyman. So let's see if this front line is moving much. It's not, but these arrows over the past 24 hours are showing that there are pushing, and there are so many reports of massive moves in here and further Russian offensives, but also of Ukrainian counter-offensives. So this is showing just on the west of Kremenar, where Deep State is showing much further. Remember that live UA map, I find, is the most conservative to Russian gains. Let's look on the ISW map, Kremenar, Lyman, and this is showing realistically, let's go that the claimed Russian control is halfway to Torsky from Kremenar. So let's say it's halfway. We'll use these lakes as a reference point. Let's go to this map here. So they're really saying, the ISW is saying that claimed Russian control is up into this region here in Torsky. And there has been some videos come out on pro-Russian stuff that is saying they are in or around Torsky as well. But I can't verify any of that. That is just here. So, and as well, somewhere that has been seeing absolutely fierce fighting, although I don't think the front line has moved much, is around Savatov here. So this region is under very heavy fighting of both sides. And let's see, over the last couple of days, not much. I know a lot of people jumped on me for missing that region. So let's say that it is, the Russians are a third the way to Borova. So let's have a look on the live UA map. So, yep, that's showing similar. Let's see if the ISW is really good at seeing the claimed Russian control. that's showing similar, and let's see if we can see that on the pro-Russian map. So it is probably saying halfway between Svatov and this water here. So let's see. So, of course, the Russian map is saying that they are a fair bit further in. They're probably down this line here somewhere, if we can see that. Look, I know the pro-Russian map isn't great at all. I am very aware of that. And we also know that down near Vuhledar, there has been so many pushes and from both sides, and a failed Russian attempt, allegedly, where they ran out of ammunition. We talked about that yesterday. But there's also a lot of sources saying that this is a very critical area for the Russians to get before starting their offensives later this month or early next month. That pretty much 99% of people are saying that is coming. So once they capture this area and Bakhmut, a lot of people are saying that will give then the Russians a better shot at coming from the north, having like multiple axes of advance. I can't talk on that. I'm not some high-level officer in the military exactly of what the goal might be there, but that is what a lot of people are saying. So that's going to end our mapping for the day. And something that I see pop up again and again and again, because I'm reading, a lot of Telegram chats, I'm reading Twitter, I'm reading articles, whatever, is about fighter jets and seeing these fighter jets and the Russian advance and this and that. Something that we need to be realistic of is, even if these fighter jets right now were said, yes, they can go, that it's going to take a long, long time, months to year, or maybe even more than a year. It's going to take a year for the US Abrams tanks to then arrive in Ukraine, and fighter jets are going to be even further along. So I completely sympathise with people saying you need to get these into Ukraine. I completely understand that argument, but at the end of the day too, you need to be realistic about it. And something that has been on my mind that I've been thinking, we love to talk about and see online if we need fighter jets and tanks and this and that. There's a little bit of me that thinks, should we be looking at some lower end stuff? And as me, as someone who was a soldier for a small amount of time, 6 and a bit years, whatever it was, some things that I would say be incredibly important and things that I don't see on the battlefield are things like active hearing protection, like Peltor hearing protection. And those are able to use with communication stuff, and of course give you, and that active hearing not only dulls down things like gunshots and artillery and things like that, but it also increases the lower end, so you can actually hear better with it and protecting your ears from it, and also good communications. So when I talk to a lot of the foreign guys, whatever, they're saying the biggest things they're lacking is like communications, and the biggest thing I don't see on soldiers is that good hearing protection, and that's something that would be able to be integrated very quickly, and I think would make a big difference to the individual soldier on the front line. We love to look at fighter jets in the sky and boats and tanks and all this shit, but at the end of the day, who's operating that? Individual soldiers, sailors, airmen, and they're the people we need to look after. And I think it's a lot easier to integrate something like that on that. And if I was in charge of billion-dollar grants, some of the first things I'd be is, right, we need 100,000 sets of good Peltor hearing protection with soldiers' personal radio so they have comms between each other. But that's just me. Really, the big news of the day is that Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov will step down, and he will be transferred to another ministerial job and replaced by Kirilo Budanov, who is the head currently of the GUR Defense Intelligence Agency. Reznikov was found buying food at hugely inflated prices for the military, even more than at supermarkets, and typically the military would get it at very cheap. And this has been evolving over the past couple of weeks, but I just can't believe that these corruption scandals, that he's allowed to step down and still keep a position in the ministry. I also struggle to think of what the Ukrainian guys on the front line fighting now for almost a year and dying for their country, and people in Ukraine by the millions who have lost everything must feel when they see that their senior officials are making so much money off seemingly endless corruption scandals. And not only that, but then writing laws to prevent officials, say, to not submit asset declarations. From the Kiev Independent, after Russia launched its full-scale invasion in February 2022, the Ukrainian authorities allowed officials not to file electronic asset declarations in the future and shut down public access to all previous declarations. Officials will only have to resume submitting asset declarations within 3 months after the end of the war. And I just think that this level of corruption, I just can't believe someone could do this. Like, your country is at war. You're an official in one of the highest positions in the country. You've got men on the front line dying every day and fighting for your nation's freedom and your people's freedom and democracy. And you are skimming money off the top by the thousands. And we've had other officials in the hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars. It's just mind-blowingly disgusting. But I'm aware that the corruption on both sides in this war is unbelievable. Although I don't have as much view into Russia, I would say that it is worse again. According to the corruption indexes, Russia is far worse than Ukraine in corruption. And I believe the reason that Russia's military is so much weaker than we thought it was because of this same corruption. And there's actually a bit of me that thinks, did Putin even be aware of this level of corruption? And he might be in his circle, but further down, if he's being told, yeah, the tanks are good to go, we've got 15,000, I wonder if he got a shock then when he found out, well, no, the majority of these tanks are just, being stripped out and sold and corrupt and whatever. It's just unbelievable. And I've even heard stories of, it was like the brass or copper propellers that they have to use on, Russian Navy boats being sold off for steel and replaced. It's just ridiculous. And this corruption is just insane. It has to raise questions in the West when, most of the money, the majority has been sent in military aid. But wherever this war goes in the coming months or years, there's going to have to be large donations of money to help rebuild Ukraine, to help get back on their feet. And there has to be questions asked about if these are the senior officials doing this. And senior officials, there's rules. They don't have to, submit asset declarations. There has to be questions asked around this and what is actually going to be happening. I have no problem with money going into Ukraine, but I do have a problem if it's going into the pocket of some prick who didn't actually support his country during the war. So also, that's sort of been a big thing from Bloomberg is India is basically allowing the West to circle sanctions by buying Russian crude oil. And well, how is this happening? Well, India is buying cheap Russian crude oil and then they are refining it and then, selling that fuel to Europe and the US. And this is only actually increasing. From Bloomberg, under the EU guidelines, India is likely operating within the rules. When Russian crude is processed into fuels in a country outside of the bloc, such as India, the refined products can be delivered into the EU because they're not deemed to be of Russian origin. So they're sort of circling around this. Ben Cahill, a senior fellow with the Centre for Strategic and International Studies, a Washington think tank, says they are aware that Indian and Chinese refiners can earn bigger margins by buying discounted Russian crude and exporting the products at market prices, and that they're fine with that. Wall Street Journal reports, citing unnamed officials from a country aligned with the US, Moscow and Tehran are planning to build a factory in Russia that could produce more than 6,000 combat drones. These cheap drones have shown some success in Ukraine, and interestingly, they've actually been found with a number of Western parts inside. And the reason they've had success, I say, is that they're so cheap to make and they can cause a huge headache for the Ukrainian air defense systems. They not only can overwhelm the system by sheer numbers, but at the unit cost of, they're saying, about $20,000 per drone, well, that creates a whole issue when a Patriot missile is around $4 million per missile. This creates a very hard situation. And similar arguments are raised where, a $5 million tank can be taken out by a $20,000 sort of NLAW missile. So that creates massive headaches again. I know this video may have just seemed like a massive dig at Ukraine, and I try and keep it as evenly balanced as I can. I realize my audience has, leans both ways at times, and I think if both sides hate me, then I'm probably being unbiased, if that makes sense. So look, if you'd like to support me, there's links down below, but never feel obliged to do that. I really appreciate you guys being here. Thanks again, and have a great day.